My father was a dreamer. He dreamed about a lot of things. We lived on a farm in southern Indiana, and he swore that there was oil on our land. That was one of the things he dreamed about. We had oil on our land. But he dreamed about a lot of things. He dreamed that we would corner the earthworm business at one point. We grew cucumbers and supplied them to the Aunt Betty Pickle Company. We grew banana peppers. One summer we planted 10,000 tomato plants, and that was our job. But the dream that he had, and the idea that he would cling to more profoundly than any other, was that he loved horses. And he would collect horses that other people didn't want. So we had a farm full of defective horses. We had horses with one lung. We had horses with biting problems. We had horses with split personalities. We had a half pony, half Tennessee walker named Duke that did not know how to walk slowly. He would only walk quickly. So Duke would walk like this. And Duke's best friend was a giant half Morgan, half quarter horse called Tony that only knew how to walk slow. So Tony would walk like this. So when you would ride these two horses together, the only way to ride them together was every 100 feet, you had to turn Duke in circles for about 30 seconds until Tony caught up. And we rented these horses to the riding public. And my job, and my brothers and sisters' job, there were 6 of us, we were the deputized posse, deputized against our will. We were the Sancho Panzas to his Don Quixote, along with our mom. Our job was to tend to these horses. We ended up with 40 horses. And we would rent them to the riding public, and it was always an adventure. It was always an adventure trying to get these horses under control. And I, as the oldest of the 6, was no great lover of these animals. I would have to ride lead horse, and if a bunch of drunk mechanics showed up late at night and my dad was off on some errand and my mom would make us saddle these horses, and the drunk mechanics would want to gallop the horses, and I'm there trying to get, at age 12, trying to get these drunk mechanics under control. That was no fun. And so what to my father was a dream seemed to me like a foolish mission. He seemed like a fool to me, and I couldn't wait to get away from all this. I could not wait to get out. My dream was to get the hell off the farm, which I did. My dream came true. My brother Brian was the one who loved horses. And he was the gentlest of all of us, and one of the most gentle human beings ever. And these horses, these reprobates, these borderline criminal horses, would gentle down. And so if there was real trouble with a horse, Brian, who was the middle brother, could gentle these horses down. And he had a way with them. He was something of a horse whisperer. So eventually, after all the children moved away, except for my little sister Beth, who was 15 or 16 at the time, my brother, Brian, left music school to go back to the farm and go into the thoroughbred racing business with my dad. And of course, they got the thoroughbreds the way my dad always got horses, which is by questionable means. Horses that had assumed names, horses that had questionable papers. And this is what my brother was trying to win horse races with. And it was crushing to him. These dreams of my dad were a burden. And my brother was struggling under those dreams. And he would call me. I was out in LA at the time. And he would unburden himself to me. And we finally arrived at a game, a solution. And that was to do everything different than what Dad said. So if Dad said run them clockwise, we decided Brian would work them out counterclockwise. If Dad said feed them oats, he'd feed them corn. All of the horses that my dad named, the thoroughbreds, their names began with the word fantastic. Fantastic Pet, Fantastic Fern, Fantastic Bob, Fantastic Red, Fantastic this, Fantastic that. Not Fantastic Fig. That was taken. Yeah, that was taken. But other than that, I think we cornered the fantastic market, and so he named a horse something else. He named a horse Denny's Gold, and this horse started to produce. This horse, the dream started to come true for my brother. And he finally broke through, and he won a race with Denny's Gold. He called me in LA, and it was the most excited I had ever heard him. And he was on his way. And he had started doing this thing of swimming the horses after the workout. We had a half-mile track that we had built through child slave labor on our farm. And they would work out the horses. My sister was the exercise rider. My brother was the trainer. My dad was the owner. So he had worked out a horse, or they had worked the horses out. And my mom and sister, who were still in her riding clothes, were fishing at our lake. And my brother was building a moat. It used to be a really popular thing to swim horses after a workout. And he was building a moat, but it wasn't finished. So he decided to go for a swim with this horse. And he got out to the middle of the lake, swimming with this horse, and he got in trouble. And he started to struggle. And my mom couldn't swim. My sister was not a strong swimmer, swam out to him and nearly drowned, trying to save him. And my brother drowned that day in the lake on our farm. And you talk about lost. We were lost. My whole family was lost. My sister barely made it out with her life and had to sit there and watch my brother surface for the last time and then disappear. And so that was in July, and nothing happened after that. My parents were frozen. They could not move. In fact, they had to move just to stay alive. They didn't do any harvesting. They sold all the horses that were left. It was the first time in any of our lifetimes there were no horses on the farm. And in the winter, my mom and dad would just walk the country roads with a flashlight. My contention is they did it just to stay alive, that movement was the only thing between them and just completely giving up. It really, I cried back here in LA, I cried every night, all through the winter. I must have been 6 months where I cried myself to sleep every night. My brother was a beautiful soul, and we missed him. And the spring came, and they hadn't been making payments on the farm. My dad hadn't been working. He had just been sitting, staring out a window. They didn't do any planting. And then one day he disappeared without telling anybody where or why. He was gone. And he was gone for 2 days, and we started freaking out. And I got on a plane, and about the time I got on the plane, word came back to me that he had showed up. He came back to the farm with a truck driven by 2 guys, giant equipment truck, Tennessee license plates. And they drove it back to the lake where my brother had drowned, and they began unloading the equipment. It was an oil drilling rig. And they set up the rig, and they started drilling for oil behind the levee of the lake where my brother had drowned. And by this time, I was home. And I really thought this was the last gasp of my dad's grief. I thought this was the last stage. This was complete denial. And that maybe if we got through this and they could sell the farm, that they would have a chance to start over. And on a Sunday morning, after they had been drilling for 3 days, these guys who had probably been drinking all night woke up. These Tennessee guys woke up from their truck, sleeping in the cab of their truck, and they had hit oil. The oil had bubbled up out of the ground, and it was a giant pool of oil, almost the size of the lake. It wasn't a gusher, it was a bubbler. It was just bloop, bloop, like this, and it had pooled behind the levee. And my father was there, and he was happy, he was energized. He was wearing a red nylon jacket. It was all spattered with this oil. And neighbors started to show up. And we were wondering why the neighbors showed up. It turns out he had gone around and he had recruited local farmers to chip in a few $100s each to be partners in this oil well. And so the word spread that Bob Bonifer had hit oil. Cowboy Bob had hit oil in his land. So people started showing up, and he would fill up quart jars with oil and hand them out to friends and neighbors as souvenirs. And my mom and sister went back to the lake for the first time since my brother had drowned. They had not been back there, and they went back to see what was what, to see the spectacle of the oil. My sister had not cried since my brother died. She cried that day. And my dad was handing out these quart jars, and he's animated. I can literally see him come back to life, and he puts his arm around me, and we're looking down at this scene, and he goes, well, we're oil people now. And I got happy. I got happy just like that, because I literally saw my family's life come back to us. And that well pumped for 3 years, and that well did what it was supposed to do. The oil from that well came back, and it paid off the debt that was overdue on the farm. It paid off all the student loans, and it bought my dad 2 new horses. And then it stopped. It had done its work. And my contention is that that oil that was not get-rich-quick oil, not get rich, that was healing oil. That oil came there to heal us. That was sacred oil. And I really believe that that oil was my brother. That oil was love. That oil was coming back to us as what we had lost when my brother died. And to this day, I believe that love is what heals us. And if we're looking out for it, and if we can dream about that, and if we can believe in a dream that something will come to us in the form of love, and that love is what will heal us, and that love is what will make us whole. And that love is what will give us stories that we can tell one day in a place that we could not ever have imagined we would have been. So I thank you for your time. I thank you for your attention. I thank you for being part of the story now yourselves. Thank you very much.